Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow, check the news, and it's official. Your private savings are now illegal. Not taxed, not regulated, illegal. And if you refuse to hand it over, you're not getting a fine. You're getting a prison sentence. 10 years. Most people think that could never happen here. But it already did. And the reason it happened is the same reason it could happen again. Welcome to the Golden Route. Today we're going to uncover a moment in history that feels like a conspiracy theory, until you realize it's documented, legal, and repeatable. Because once you understand how the system did it once, you'll recognize the pattern when it tries to do it again, only this time with digital money. The Great Gold Heist. How the state nationalized your safety. If you've ever seen the US debt clock, it feels unreal, like watching an odometer spin out of control. Over $35 trillion climbing, faster than your brain can emotionally process. And here's the dangerous part. For decades, politicians treated debt like a video game score. High number, dramatic headline, then everyone moves on. But debt isn't a number. Debt is a structure. And when the structure gets too heavy, it doesn't collapse politely. It collapses strategically. Because a government facing a debt trap has only a few options. Cut spending, political suicide, raise taxes, public rebellion, default openly, financial panic, or do the fourth option. The option that sounds harmless, but quietly empties your future, the soft default. Pay everything back, but pay it back in money that buys less. And to pull that off, they need control. Which brings us to the moment the mask slipped. In the late 1920s, America looked unstoppable. The Roaring Twenties, easy money, booming stocks, optimism everywhere. People weren't just investing, they were borrowing to invest. Buying shares on margin, meaning if prices went up, you won big. And if prices fell, you were ruined. Then 1929 hits. The market collapses. And suddenly everyone discovers something terrifying. The system wasn't built on stability. It was built on leverage. Now here's the part most people miss. Back then, America operated under a gold-linked monetary system. That meant the government couldn't just create unlimited money without consequences. So when the crisis hit, the government faced a problem it couldn't solve inside the old rules. They needed to spend to stop total collapse. But the gold system restrained them. So what do you do when the rules block your survival? You change the rules, not by debate, by emergency. On April 5, 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. The message was simple: hand over your gold, coin, bullion, certificates, private ownership, criminalized. You had a short window to comply, and the payment you received, a fixed paper price, $20.67 per ounce. But here's the twist, the part that reveals the real strategy. After the government collected the gold, they changed the price. They raised it to $35 per ounce. So if you turned in your gold at the old price, you didn't just cooperate. You took an instant loss in purchasing power. It wasn't a default with fireworks. It was a default with paperwork. That is what a soft default looks like in real life. And the genius of it, if we're being brutally honest, was psychological, because it reframed the confiscation as necessary, as patriotic, as for stability. And when people are scared, they accept things they would never accept in calm times. So here's the question. If they can declare gold illegal, what else can they declare illegal? Now this is where it gets darker, because the rules didn't apply equally. The order included exemptions. Some categories of rare and unusual coins weren't treated the same way. And what happened next was predictable. People with knowledge, lawyers, connections, found ways to protect their wealth. They relabeled, reclassified, repackaged. Some forms of gold were treated like collectibles, not money. This is a living example of what economists call the Cantillon Effect. When new rules and new money are created, the people closest to power benefit first. The further you are from the center of power, the more you get crushed. So the lesson isn't just gold was taken. The real lesson is, in a crisis, the system doesn't save everyone. It saves itself. And it does it by rewriting definitions. What counts as money? What counts as property? What counts as legal? That precedent matters because it never disappeared. It's still there in the background like a loaded tool in a drawer. In 1933, they had to knock on doors, enforce compliance physically, collect metal. That was hard. Today, your savings are mostly numbers on screens, deposits in banks, retirement accounts, digital balances. So the question we end part one with is simple and unsettling. If they could do it then with gold, how would they do it now with digital money? And that brings us to part two. Because the next evolution isn't soldiers and safes. It's something smoother, quieter. A system that doesn't have to seize your wealth, because it can simply rewrite what your wealth means. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people think losing wealth happens like a disaster, a crash, a headline, a dramatic moment. But modern wealth is usually destroyed in silence. Not stolen, not confiscated, just diluted. Like putting one drop of ink into water, then another, and another, until the original disappears. Welcome back to the Golden Route. In part one, we showed how the state criminalized gold ownership during crisis and forced citizens into a bad trade. In part two, we reveal the updated version, the silent eraser, inflation, measurement tricks, asset inflation, and the final blueprint, the digital cage. 1. The debt spiral, when interest becomes a government program. When debt gets large enough, the interest isn't just a cost, it becomes a monster line item. And in recent years, interest costs have surged because rates rose. That creates a dangerous cycle. The government borrows more, interest costs rise. More borrowing is needed to cover interest, confidence weakens, rates rise again. This is how debt becomes self-feeding. Now, a normal person would react by cutting spending, but governments don't cut the way households do. Because huge parts of spending are politically untouchable. So when cutting is impossible and default is unacceptable, they choose the option that avoids immediate panic. Soft default. And soft default needs a mechanism. That mechanism is the silent eraser. 2. The silent eraser. Inflation that feels like your fault. The silent eraser works like this. Your paycheck might rise, but your purchasing power falls faster. And what makes people tolerate it is this. They blame themselves. Maybe I'm not budgeting right. Maybe I should work harder. Maybe this is just normal now. But it's not normal, it's structural. Because even measuring inflation has become flexible. Quick question. Have you ever noticed how official inflation can feel low, while your rent, groceries, insurance, childcare, and energy feel like they're exploding? That gap, the difference between your lived reality and official reality, is where the silent eraser hides. One of the tricks is substitution. If steak gets too expensive, the model assumes you'll buy hamburger instead. So on paper, your cost of living hasn't really risen that much. But in real life, that's not stability. That's downgrade. It's telling you, you didn't get poorer, you just eat worse now. And when inflation is reported lower than reality, it reduces pressure on the system. Less outrage, less benefit adjustments, less accountability, and while your savings shrink, something else explodes upward. Assets. Born the modern Cantillon Effect, who gets rich first. When new money is created or liquidity floods markets, it doesn't land evenly. It enters through institutions, banks, financial markets, large borrowers, asset buyers. So the first recipients of cheap money can buy stocks, real estate, businesses, hard assets. Then prices rise. And by the time the new money reaches regular wages, the cost of living has already adjusted upward. That's the modern Cantillon Effect. It's not just the rich get richer. It's a system design where proximity to money creation determines outcomes. Asset owners win. Wage earners chase. Savers lose quietly. This is why saving feels pointless now, because the rules changed. The game shifted from save and build to own assets or fall behind. Now here's the problem for the system. There's still one thing people can do to escape. Cash. There's still one thing people can do to escape. Cash. Cash is freedom in one specific way. It allows you to exit the system. You can hold value outside banks, outside apps, outside rules that update overnight. That's why cash is inconvenient for centralized control. So what happens next logically? You build a system where exiting is impossible. You remove physical money and replace it with a digital version controlled at the source. That's the concept behind a central bank digital currency, a CBDC. Now, we need to be careful. Different countries talk about CBDCs differently, but the potential features are what matter. Because a CBDC could allow instant negative rates, your balance shrinks if you don't spend. Spending restrictions, where you can or can't use it. Programmable rules, expiry dates, location limits, automatic enforcement, no court needed for every action. Let me put it simply. With cash, control is hard. With a CBDC, control becomes software. And software updates quietly. 5. The digital cage, control without confiscation. Here's the scariest part. A digital cage doesn't need to seize your wealth. It can trap you with rules. You can own money you can't move freely. You can have a balance that loses power automatically. You can be paid in a currency that pushes you into certain behaviors. That is a cage, not made of steel, made of code. And when a crisis hits, war, recession, banking panic, that's when emergency measures become temporary solutions. And temporary solutions have a habit of becoming permanent. Just like 1933 wasn't presented as theft, it was presented as necessity. So what do? Now, this channel is not about fear. It's about pattern recognition and preparation. History shows a simple truth. When systems are under pressure, they protect themselves. So the individual strategy is also simple. You reduce exposure to what can be diluted infinitely, and increase exposure to what cannot be printed on demand. Traditionally, that means scarce assets, real assets, like productive property, scarce stores of value, like precious metals, and in the modern era, certain decentralized digital assets. Important note, everything has risk. The goal isn't to gamble. The goal is to avoid being the default donor class of the system, the group that pays for the rescue silently. 1933 proves something important. In a national emergency, definitions can be rewritten. Gold became illegal. Confiscation became policy. And citizens were forced into a bad trade. So here's the question that matters now. If the next crisis arrives in a digital-only money world, what stops the same playbook, only faster? If you want, in the next video I'll break down what soft default looks like in real life, the warning signs before a currency loses credibility, and how regular people build a survival portfolio without getting reckless. Subscribe to stay on the golden route. And comment below, one word, safe or not safe. Do you believe your savings are safe in a system that survives by dilution? Stay alert, stay sovereign. See you in the next one.